Welcome to Greater Good Radio Hawaii, where leaders inspire leaders. Greater Good Radio Hawaii is dedicated to social entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Evan Leong, and with me is my co-host, Carrie Leong.
Thank you, Evan. Today's guest is Peter Kay, one of Hawaii's most recognized technology visionaries. Peter developed Hawaii's first internet classes, first commercial website, and most of the local blue-chip company's first online presence. Peter has appeared on the cover of Midweek Magazine and Hawaii Business Magazine. He was named Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst & Young, and Pacific Business News recognized Peter as one of Hawaii's top 40 leaders under 40 years old, with one of his companies being recognized by PBN's Fastest 50 list for 3 different years. You may have heard him as a voice behind the Your Computer Minute radio program or read his technology column for road runners around town. His latest company, Titan Key Software, created a patent-pending anti-spam technology and has developed a global distribution and supplier network. Please welcome to Greater Good Radio, Peter Kay.
Wow. I hate long bios like that. I got to shorten that thing.
That was the shortened version.
That's too damn long. That is too
I shortened it.
I can't, I'm like, I can't bear hearing that read. But anyway, thank you for...
That was only like 1/3 of it, and I shortened it.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's good fun to do this.
That just shows how well established you are.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, oh my God, stop already with this Peter Kay guy.
Who is this? Are you like 80 years old? You have a lot of stuff.
And we have a lot to talk about. Can you tell us about your first adventure as an entrepreneur?
First adventure as an entrepreneur in Hawaii over 20 years ago. This is back in 1984. First came to the shores, 21-year-old punk, and the typical classic Haole comes to Hawaii, doesn't want to go back home kind of story. And I was always a soft. Well,
you fell in love, or what happened?
Absolutely. Well, I'm originally from Chicago, so anybody from Chicago, you walk over, you're like, oh my God. This is it. So it was one of those things where I connected instantly with Hawaii and knew that this was the place where I was going to live for the rest of my life. And started looking around for a job because back then I was just 21 and I was a software engineer and really not an entrepreneur at all. And was looking for a job. But back then in the mid-'80s, 1984, there really wasn't much of a job market for microcomputer type programmers, that's where I came from. There was mainframe programmer jobs and IT department kind of programmer jobs, but no kind of software developers job in the new sense.
There weren't really that many microcomputers at the time, were there?
That's right. That was 1984, right? Mm-hmm. The IBM PC was in '81. This was just the very, very beginning of the PC revolution. So really, there was no jobs per se. And so, what do you do when you're unemployed? Well, you start a business. So what happened was I got involved with some people who had a company and they needed a technical person. And so it actually was a whole big farce because they needed a technical person, but they didn't want to pay for a technical person. So instead I was made a partner. And a partner is a cool way of saying, look, why don't you come on board and work for free? But that was my first sort of entry into sort of entrepreneuring. And I was really just a programmer at that time and did some programming, but the company never made it, actually.
How long did it last for?
Didn't last they didn't go past, not even a year. I think they went for about like 6 months. But that was the first sort of instance of sort of feeling like a partner.
So what did you learn from that?
What you learn is that, well, it was that company and the one that was followed up right behind it where we developed a software product. Long and short was, what I learned was, you want to succeed as an entrepreneur, you got to do sales, bro. Because I was a programmer then, just a programmer. And so really the lesson was, you've really, really got to do sales. And I don't think it's possible for an entrepreneur to succeed without really being a killer salesperson.
Were you always pretty good at sales? Because
I was never good at sales. I had no idea what sales was. I was a programmer.
I can't imagine you being a programmer now. I mean, it doesn't match.
It doesn't fit the brand, right?
Yeah.
Well, programmers, remember, you have to realize programmers know that all salespeople are BSers. We know that all salespeople are liars. That's all. That's how they do their stuff. They lie and they sort of twist the truth, and they somehow use a Jedi mind trick to talk customers into buying stuff. That's what all programmers believe. So absolutely not a salesperson. But the lesson, you could either, when you're presented with a lesson, you could either follow the lesson and learn from it, or ignore the lesson to be fated to relearn it again and again throughout your life, right? Mm-hmm. So the lesson was be a salesperson. So I knew I had to be a salesperson, and without knowing really what to do, I did the funky thing. As I walked into a library and I said, "Please, library, give me the right book that will let me be a good salesperson." And I found the section where all the sales books was, and I pulled out the first book I pulled out was the last book I pulled out, which was The 1 Minute Salesperson. I don't know if you read that book. Great book. The 1 Minute Salesperson, by the same guy that did the 1 Minute Manager.
Oh, Kenneth Blanchard?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great book.
1 minute's more my reading spectrum, so
exactly.
That would match me.
Well, it's not just the minute. For me, my reading spectrum is it's got to be a thin book. I don't want to buy thick books. I don't like. Mm-hmm. Thick books means that the author doesn't really know what they're talking about, and they got to take 300 pages to explain it. A 20-page book, a 50-page book is like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Or a 20-page book on audio.
Right. So I took out the 1 Minute Salesperson, and that's how I learned sales, and I've never looked back ever since. I mean, it's always been, I kind of understood what sales really is. Actually, and I hope one day to explain this to other programmers, sales is really an engineering exercise. It's really engineering. You're really understanding a customer's problem and engineering a solution for it. And providing it to them. And
so what was next then? What came after that? You got into this company. They brought you in as a partner. You kind of saw it from the top down. And
first two companies went bang, went belly up. Didn't make it for lack of sales.
Did you lose money in those? Or?
No, because I was sort of like the partner. So I lost my time. There was no money per se. I didn't have any money to invest.
You were selling software?
Yeah, the second company we had developed a software product, and it was sort of like a precursor to today's Act. Have you heard of Act? Act is a sort of a sales management software where you
like
maintain
CRM.
your leads. Sort of a CRM, if you will. It was a CRM that was specifically suited for the insurance industry. It was a really cool product. Developed it from top to bottom, had it already shipped, discs, the whole deal, distribution system, everything. But the sales never materialized.
How long were you involved with that company?
The two of them, the first two, took, I'd say, overall, probably about 18 months from start to finish. And both flopped. And by the time 18 months had transpired, I just moved here, right? I had no money left whatsoever.
So you guys had production versions of the software in only 18 months?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the last one I did was even less than 18 months. It took me about 6 months to get it from start to finish.
Huh.
Those are back in the older days where one program could actually develop software in that short a time.
It's amazing.
Well, back then it was not, now it's a lot more complicated. Because there's a lot more of an expectation from the user. There's a lot more richness. That back then, 20 years ago, wasn't quite as rich. It was able to do that. Back then, one programmer could write a game. Right now, you got to have a Hollywood studio to write a game. Mm-hmm. So times have changed. But it was after. So I ran out of money completely. And actually, herein lies another good story. Came down to my last dollar bill. I had $1.
Where were you living?
I was living in an apartment that I had rented with a roommate. But, cash-wise, I had one physical dollar. That was it. That's all I had left. So what do you do when you got a buck left? Well, I went into McDonald's and I bought a chocolate shake. Chocolate shakes back then were less than $1. So that's what it was. And it was interesting because the very next day, as luck would have it, fate, right? That's why I know I'm supposed to be in Hawaii. The very next day, I look in my mailbox and there's a check. Where's the check from? Well, the check was from some guy had rear-ended me. I was on Sunset Beach weeks before, and some guy had rear-ended me, and the check was a sort of an insurance payment to fix the car, which of course I never fixed because I used the money to eat. And a day or so after that, I get a phone call from a guy, Mark Wong, who today operates
the commercial data systems.
Back then, he had a company called Microtech. And Mark Wong calls me and says, "Hey, you know what? We're getting this big contract. I need a programmer. I saw your resume. Somehow, I think I had sent them my resume, months ago, whatever. And we need a programmer. Can you come down and talk to us right now?" I was like, "Yeah, I can come down and talk to you right now." So that was sort of my first and last and only job I've ever had. Lasted for 9 months before his company split, and then we started another company called Zentech, and Zentech. I knew about sales, and Zentech was the first success that we had.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more on Greater Good Radio.